Hello and welcome to Conversations with Cezanne about his Plejaren context. This is the first installment, episode one, of the conversations where we're going to ask a series of questions of Cezanne about the nature of his contact with these off-world non-Earth humans. Should be really interesting. Today we have an old-time friend of Cezanne's. Her name is Annie Deriso. She has a lot of experience working with Cezanne, producing the book and books that he has on this subject. So I hope that you'll have a good time joining us today for this conversation.
I can't remember. How long ago was it, Z, that you met up with Sim Jazz and all of that happened?
Well, it would probably be a proper time for an introduction to what people are witnessing here. I had this experience with when I was out in the jungle one day, and I was just moseying around and where I usually do, and it was like in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and probably 100 miles from most anything. And I came across someone sitting or kind of wedged into the mangroves. If you don't know what mangroves are, they're like a tree that's roots are exposed. So it's like impossible to get through them, and about the only way around them is to go over them, and then that's slippery. Otherwise, you get into what's called the suck, which is like the mud that's underneath, and that's where your foot goes in, and it goes down to like the knee or so, and it's just totally miserable spot. And anyway, there was this person I saw, and she was wedged in there, and everything looked rather out of place, and it was just odd for me to see somebody out there first off, and then next it was like it was a female, and she looked about 24 years old or so, and she had blonde hair, short blonde hair, and she was wearing this like blue outfit that was rather skin tight. And in other words, it didn't seem to be in a place that you would see somebody like that. And so anyway, she saw me, and so I kind of thought I'd walk towards her and see what came up. And the whole time I'm going through my head is like, maybe I smelled a lot of the jungle or something in particular, that this wasn't real or something. And so, but anyways, I proceeded, because that's just the way I am. And as I got closer to her, I could see that she was a little frightened, and I understood that, so I kind of went more cautious. And to me, it was kind of like, when you find an animal stuck in a fence or something, and so you have to gain a little trust and calm them down before you get any closer. And so that's kind of what was going on in my head. And as I got closer to her, I noticed that, she was totally not in the right place, right? And something was really odd and missed on this. So anyways, I felt like I pulled out my knife, to help free her, and she got scared again, kind of jumped. And so therefore I thought, take a step by step. And so I had my knife, and I kind of showed her what it does. And then I set it next to on one of the branches of the tree, and so she could reach it and touch it. And she reached out, and she's always watching me the whole time. She grabbed it, and I kind of showed her to move it in a certain way, and that, what I was about to do. And it seemed to have gained a little trust with her. And so anyways, she set it back there and kind of looked at me like, it's okay. So I went ahead, and I'm kind of making the story short, but I freed her from it. And then once she was out of it, I got her off to the side where there was more solid land, and she wasn't walking right. And so I thought, well, maybe she got injured or something in the process and stuff. And so I came closer to her again, and I did it with a lot of caution. And I just kind of showed her what I wanted to do. I wanted to carry her wherever she wanted to go. And she again looked a little nervous and stuff, but I mean, there probably wasn't another option for her at the moment, or at least that's what I felt. And so she allowed me. And she was, just shorter than me, not much. And she was, very firmly built and everything. So I anticipated about 100 or 110 pounds. And so when I went to lift her, I almost threw her over my head because she was so light. And it maybe estimated it's like 25 pounds or something. And so anyways, I lifted her, and she didn't talk to me, but she motioned to me the directions. And so I followed that, and I went with her, or carried her to this place that I hadn't seen before out there. It was like a big mound. And I didn't know at the time, I never seen any mounds or anything out in Florida. And so when I got there, it was kind of unusual because there was no growth or anything on it. And so she motioned for me to take her up there and to set her down. And I did. And then she kind of motioned for me to back away. And with that, she was gone. And then so I had looked up, and I could see sort of like a big circle. I know that was at that time, I didn't know, but it looked pretty small, but it was just round like circle, and then it was gone. And so I did not know what all that was, right? And so I left it, and about the next week I'm down there, and I'm walking, through the trails again, like I usually do. And I thought, maybe I should go check out that mound and see what was on it and stuff. And because I found out during that time that I guess the Indian automatically went and stepped into it. And next thing I know, I was on the ship, and there was like 6 odd, beautiful looking people. And that's where it all began. And so I wrote the book called Plejaren Diaries Accidental Contact. There's a book. Yeah, right there it is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to ask you, Z, who is Sim Jazz? What have you been able to find out anything?
Well, it's a group of people that aren't from here.
Okay, all right.
And she just happens to be one of them.
Well, I think there's a little more to it than that. I mean, that y'all met in the middle of the swamp for one thing. And
yeah.
Why did they accept you? Why did they invite you into their family?
Well, I guess my understanding at the time was like Sim just was some significance to them, and that they were a lab. Basically, they study things. They study like the migration of animals and insects and earth materials and all these different things about the earth, and how each affects each other. And they really didn't have any interest whatsoever in any form of contact and what they thought of humans was what they've learned, and that was like we were monsters, we were violent and all these things. So
Yeah.
it was kind of like meeting a bear in the woods, right, sort of thing. And so anyway, when I came back on there, they had they thought it was rather unusual that I helped her. And I didn't fit the program in a sense of what they thought. Although none of these people had any experience with humans or had any training or anything of the sort. It was just, like I say, an accidental contact. And since I had done what I did for her and took her back there, and wasn't, trying to do anything else, other odd things, or ask questions or try to, form a communication or anything. They were curious. And so they had permission to take another step and just see who it was that I was. And so, and it was sort of like an appreciation for bringing Sam Jess back to their ship. And so it all started right there. And we started to have communications and trying to communicate with each other. And we found it to be really difficult for a time.
Well, where are the Plejarians? Do they have a planet, or did they just live on that ship? Or Where did they come from?
Well, that's a really big question, but basically what I know about them is that they're about 5,000 years more advanced than we are. And they come from a place, they have colonies, and supposedly a planet that I haven't seen yet, but it's about 500 some light years away from us, and it's past about 80 light years past the Pleiades constellation.
80 light years past the Pleiades. Wow. Okay.
So that's like 500 and some light years from here.
How long does it take you to get there? I mean, you haven't been to their home planet, but
Well, I've been in the
zooming around.
Yeah, I've been to the neighborhood, and I've visited different structures, I guess you could say, that's there. And in a sense, I think that, I mean, just an estimate is it's like the blink of an eye, because basically it takes longer to plot it, which doesn't take long at all until you're there. I mean, it's just basically instantaneous.
So you just plug in navigation on your phone and punch the button and you're there.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to put it.
Yeah. Wow.
So I want to ask one quick question here. You know, in talking about the Plejarens, and they seem to be human and non-Earth humans. What do you see as some of the biggest differences between Earth humans that we are and these Plejarens? You know, physically and as well as spiritually.
I don't see a whole lot. It's kind of interesting. I've had multiple experiences with them. This is an ongoing basis, so I'm there on a frequent basis. And what I have learned is that they don't have as big, what do you call it? Like intestinal tract and stuff. And so a lot of their waste is excreted through their skin, but it doesn't smell and you can't really feel it. Really, their eyes are incredibly big, and they're like a blue, and there'll be some sort of changes, you know, in the sense of their eyes as far as the color, but not a lot. And inside those, what you see is, I mean, they're like ours, but larger. And what you see is like these little gold flakes that seem to move or float within their eyes. And when you look at them, it's almost like hypnotic. I mean, it's just like so beautiful. And it's like you're going into a space in a sense. And so it took me quite a while to get used to that part. But as far as like their, what do you call the things that they do, just their normal ways, seem to be extremely similar to that of ours. The way they see things, the way they feel things, and so on and so forth, is really representative of us. But it seems as though that over a period of time and through the types of work that they do, that it isn't always that they have gotten used to, not like smiling was a thing that was kind of foreign to them. They recognized it and they still feel and have the emotion, but they don't outwardly express it, or at least when I first met them. I introduced hugs to them and handshakes, and that became like a real addiction between them. And it would be almost as though they were looking forward to seeing me just so they could do it, you know, sort of thing. But what I found is that, you know, hugging a person here or shaking somebody's hands and looking them in the eyes, the energy of it is quite different, because they seem to, it's a moment in time. You know, it's not something you just do, a reaction. It's something that's important to them. And so many things occur in that touch with them.
Okay, that sounds amazing. And you know, if we wanted to go a little bit more into like a spiritual understanding or understanding of how they sort of interpret their place in the universe, do you think there's a huge difference, or what is the difference maybe between the Plejarens and Earth humans, and what do you think about that?
I think that the average person would not quite understand their type of spirituality, although there are the people that are like claim to be spiritual here without a known religion or something would be more comfortable with their type of spirituality. It is based nearly purely on love, and the motion they go through motions, right? In like a ceremony, they being, we are a part, basically, they see people or beings as fragments, and each person is a fragment of a whole, and that whole would be the source. So it can be applicable to pretty much any religion.
How did
Okay,
they talk to you? Go ahead, Dan.
no, I was just curious about exactly what you're saying. How did they take communication? Was it did you get the feeling there was a mode of maybe telepathy or something
Right.
that they communicated that was a little different than Earth humans?
I've never felt anything like telepathy. Well, your mind, the way your mind works, yes, but it isn't telepathy. There are several different levels of communication. In the very beginnings, when I was speaking to them, it was very difficult. And set the scenario is this is a lab ship. None of them were trained, but through interactions with them on an ongoing basis, they had people that they communicate with to log daily entries, in a sense. I'm using the simplest terms, so that whoever was overseeing them could keep up with what was happening. And they're the ones who allowed them to continue this interaction between me and them. And then it evolved, because they were trying to learn from us. And something was different about the way I was working with them and they were working with me than the people that were trained and had chosen individuals to work with from here, on Earth. And so they continued this idea. And so what we would do is they would ask me something and I would ask them something. The one thing that I'm kind of different than a lot of people. I really am not interested in who built the pyramids. I am, but I mean, I'm with these beautiful beings, and it was like they had so much more to offer, than playing with me and telling me about the pyramids or whatever, this or that. I have learned some of those things, and the funny thing about our communication is that I don't have to ask that question, because in the things that they show me and teach me that is totally unrelated, I get the answers to those things about that I may have interest in, like pyramids or whatever it may be, Bermuda Triangle. But what we found a stumbling block, and that was basically I would tell them, okay, here's a guy walking down the street without a shirt, and pretty simple, right? But it wasn't quite that way. And for like 16 hours, we got stuck on this subject, and they're all sitting there and they're all just excited and waiting, bated breath, what they were seeing. And they kept asking me these same questions. And it was like so hard for me to quite get my head around. It's just a guy and he's walking down the street, and he doesn't have a shirt on. And what I learned is that when they see something or there's something new to them, they look at it in so many different aspects, rather like 3 times the way that when we see something, we just kind of put everything else together, where they need to know every little detail. And so it got to a point where I just said, hey, look, guys, this is fun and everything, but I think I need a break. I mean, I got a whole other life, here to take care of, and being with them is very enjoyable and everything, and just being in that environment with them is just, special. But I had to have a break because my mind was going dead, right? And so during this little time off and everything, one day I got, it's funny when I feel them, I feel like this tingle, like a static electricity around me. And so I know they're present, right? And so suddenly Sam Jess showed up, and came in, and she goes, "Where you been?" and sort of thing, And so it was like I was explaining it as just on downtime and everything, and we interacted like we missed each other and everything. And then she goes, "What do you look?" I had this TV on, and I had this sitcom on, right? And it had to do with like family and stuff and interactions between people and all. And I said, "Well, sit down." And so we sat there together and watched it. And she enjoyed it. And she asked me some questions about what was taking place and all. So I showed it her again and again and again, the same show. And she was like, "You keep showing me the same thing, what are you doing?" And I said, "This is what it was like when you guys were questioning me on board your ship." I said, "Do you understand now?" And that was like a breakthrough, because then I could select different shows and things like that for them to view. And then after they viewed it, they could ask me questions. And then the questions were a lot more simple. And then we just started this dialogue that just went almost to the norm, yet they still don't quite understand everything because they're not familiar with the kinds of things we do in our lives.
So let me ask a quick question about that. Do you think initially all of the questions they were asking about the man without a shirt walking down the street, do you think that came from maybe their understanding of what Earth humans were like, and the idea that they needed to get more information to feel comfortable with understanding things and understanding what you were saying? Or was it a part of their natural process to always ask questions, ad infinitum, forever, about something, in order to get every possible angle or facet of an understanding of it? Or was it just really specific to them not knowing anything about Earth humans? What do you think about that?
At first, I didn't quite understand what was so complicated, and what would be the purpose of knowing these other things when it was such a simple thing, right? And then what I started to understand was that, number one, they had no training whatsoever about humans or people from Earth, other than the boilerplate, advisory in a sense. And so when they were observing these things, they really didn't know a lot about us, right? And so they were looking at it from so many different points of view all at the same time. And then what I gained from what it was, why they see things in so many different ways, is they see it as though they don't only need to understand that there was a man walking down the street without a shirt. They need to know how they would react to that if they were there in person, and what there's so many different things that could occur in that process. And so they needed to see it, like I would say, we see in 1D, they see in 3D in a sense, So that's their thinking process.
Well, they're really afraid of us, afraid of humans. They're even afraid of our animals. And they don't understand why we deal with animals that can kill us. So you kind of broke the ice on that, I read. So tell us about Kitty.
Well, that's way ahead, but essentially, what they told me about like animals and things and why they don't react to them or enact, whatever it is, how they don't contact them, is because that they can be dangerous, and they had no idea or training or the types of protections that they would need in order to interact with them. And that they also told me that we were one of the only planets that they had ever visited where humans actually interact with animals that can kill you, in a sense. And they didn't understand the dynamics of that. They said that most planets, they just kill the animals. And they're like a pest, or, like an annoying insect or something. And so it was kind of unique. We were sort of unique in that aspect. But did I answer that?
Yes. And so they're looking at you kind of differently than most humans or the other contactees that they have. What is it that they're learning from you that they're not learning from other contactees? I mean, you were an accidental one, but they do have contactees, people who they're taking up to ships and working with, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to do with that as a whole. It's just that I was rather different, and that they weren't trained, and that obviously that we were able to do something with somewhat ease, right, in the communication and the learning and the process between us and them. And this caught the attention of the other people that oversee what it is that they're doing and everything. And they found that the progress between me and them was moving much faster and with ease in comparison to those others that they had been or had selected. And basically they told me I wouldn't have fit the program as a contactee. And one thing is that it's about contact, about alien contact with Earth, and the process in which they are preparing us for that. And so they wanted to find out what was going on. And for me, I'm a lot different than what I guess most people would be. I don't have a lot of questions. I was so interested and so captivated with just being in their presence and experiencing them and how they would react. And so I was like studying them in a sense. And that, it's kind of like what I used to tell people about astral travel. They would always want me to show them how to astral travel. And like I would explain to them that, I can tell you how to get into the position to consciously do this, that the thing that you do every day. And, then, but I couldn't take them any farther than that until they figured it out for themselves. Otherwise, they would be following me and maybe never found the way to astral travel in a conscious state. Also, I explained like when you think about it, if you haven't done it before and all that, about all the things that you would do, the places you would travel to, the people that you would want to know about, and who shot Kennedy sort of thing. And when you first experience like astral travel, that's the least thing that's on your mind when you start to experience the things that are occurring in the travel, right? Once you're out of the body, that stuff doesn't matter anymore because there's so much more in front of you that you want to discover. And it's the same with them, when I'm around them, like I said before, I don't really care about finding out about all these mysteries here on Earth and such. I'm more interested about them, and not really necessarily even their history or anything like that, but about the experiences that I'm having with them on a regular basis and getting to know them. And by doing this, I'm getting all those other things that just seem to attach as I move forward with my relationships with them.
So it's your playtime. You're enjoying it and not asking all the big questions and getting all involved. But I want to know answers. I want to know some scientific answers. Are you able to get into any of that yet? As to how the universe works, or just
Well, in a way, the one thing is that the way that we are attempting to learn how to travel through space probably will never work because the time and with what we have and so on and so forth, and the things about wormholes and all this stuff doesn't really need to exist. And the primary reason for us not advancing as quickly as what we would hope is because geometry and physics and stuff is different in space than it is here. At one point, I was able to witness them giving me these two pieces of metal in space, right? And I touched them together and they fused together. And as they were two different types of material, but they were from Earth. And by touching them, they just automatically fused together. And they told me when I did that to pull, and it stretched. So I started to understand, like, so metals can bond there, and you're in the soup, right? This whole different place, and things react differently. I'm sure there was a lot more to it than just touching the two pieces of metal together, but essentially that's what it was and what they wanted me to see. And just, your imagination can just really go wild at this point. If you could take metal and small pieces of metal, make them a lot larger and change their shape and design for something that, you want, then, it's unlimited, right? And the thing is, go ahead.
How far did they stretch? How big were they? How far did they stretch?
Well, they weren't real big. They were, like this size, each of them. And so when I touched them together, and then I was able to pull them to almost twice the size.
Wow.
There was no seam where they welded together or anything. It was just, and it was all done just with my hands touching them and stretching. That's all it took.
Let me ask you a question. Let's see. So what I'm kind of curious about is, like, there's you're describing as like 5,000 years difference between the Plejarens, where the Plejarens are at as a developed human society, and where Earth humans are at. In some of the content of some of the books, you talk about the technology or the appearance of certain things that are, to us, very magical in terms of how they are able to use their technology. On kind of the back end of that, what do you see as the connection to their connection to their technology versus our connection to our technology? How do you see that as being kind of different? That may be a little esoteric to talk about, but something I'm kind of curious about. How do they connect to their technology versus how we think of technology connection?
That's a little bit hard to answer because it's beyond my understanding, most of what they do and how they arrange it. It's like, just like I know they got like these coils in the ship, and that they generate something which creates a field around the ship. And so they can move through whatever's outside, whether it be space or air or water, with no problem. And like when they move from place to place, they have the ability to just move like an airplane, as you've probably seen on videos recently, but they also can move from one place to another, just like that one video where the jet pilot is chasing them and it just vanishes. And then the next thing you know it, they pick it up on radar instantaneously 62 miles away. Well, how that happens is that however they travel, it's the ship, they can basically kind of see in the future. It's probably bad words to use, but they know the place that they want to go to, and they can tell that there's nothing there or that there's nothing coming that way. And when they activate whatever it is, I would call it like jumping. They move from the place that they were in to the place that they want to be. And if there's also that in that shield that surrounds them, that kind of invisible shield, it has like what I would call AI technology, in a sense that they can sense things that could be of danger, like a meteor or whatever that would be coming through, and it changes whatever position or whatever they need to do in order to avoid that or allow that to fly off of them, so that they don't have any of that type of danger. So it can, I guess you would call it, the AI actually can see ahead of time, in a sense, or instantaneously in front of them, in order for them to allow and move in that way. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. I guess, they have kind of it seems like they have kind of a seamless connection to their technology versus ours is a little more to put it on our body and attach to it somehow. And that's kind of made who they are a little bit different, perhaps, as a result of that kind of capability through their technology. But as I understand it, it's also their spiritual evolution, that they're at a point in their existence where they have an awareness and a capability spiritually that the two sort of come together. I guess, if I was going to say something about where our technology is as Earth humans, it's really much, much different than that. Because we seem to look at things as, physical objects that we have to connect with physically, and they don't have the same sort of spiritual connection to that. So
I know what you're asking.
Yeah, what can you say about that?
First you got to imagine they've already mastered the universe, right? So there's little to I guess figure out, in a sense, because there's a natural order of things that occurs naturally. And one of the biggest things is like technology, and if you want to figure out the technology, we have to still play with toys, right? And we have to use this for that or that for this, and that we're not connected. In other words, like imagine like a chimp or an ape, how they're considered to have evolved as far as they're going to evolve. Like we were able to bring them to the point of using a stick, and as a tool, but that's about as far as it's ever going to go. We can teach them habits, like sign language and things like that. But as far as evolving the brain beyond that, where they could be like working with technology and that sort of thing, they can't. And there's a lot in between here, but generally speaking, we use all of our brain right now. And the thing is that there's still a lot of room in there for inserting files, in a sense. And so in my opinion, we've reached our evolution in the sense of our brain. The thing that's missing still is the one thing that I have noticed about these people, that it's still a little uncomfortable for me and such, but it's the love thing. And now when I speak of love, it's kind of foreign in a definition to what we consider love to be, but you're basically naked when you're with them. There's nothing that you can hide. And if you do, or just try to deceive or anything else, then you're just not of much interest to them. And so through this process, they are filling or have filled the other parts of their brain in which that we are missing. And so that also evolves into their technology. And like, another general statement is like here on Earth, right? We got a new technology that comes along, so that we have all these new types of jobs and everything that we need to fill. And, so we have to train people and adjust people to fit that program in order to be able to supply that new idea or product and then distribute it. Where in their society, as you, after your birth and everything, you have a multitude of surrogate parents plus the biologicals, and they encourage you to find what it is that you tend to gravitate to. In other words, like toys or different things. And then that child has no limitations. You don't have to have a shelter. You don't have to have food. You don't have to have any process, right? Because that's already been established and overcome. And so what they do is they find what it is they like, and then they pursue it. And that becomes their job, so to speak, even though there's no real such thing as a job. It's just a choice that they have. And when they do that, the natural order to things is that, as you know, like in simplest terms, like here, if we were, created a new technology, well, there would already be people that would be trained and understand this and experts in that field, no matter what it may be, because it's the natural order, because they allow the process to be created for them. So, is that understandable?
Yes, it is. It's really amazing. The big difference is that as you're describing this, we're talking about thousands of years worth of evolution that would have to happen for Earth humans to really get to that point where we can have that kind of functionality in our society. So that really says a lot about, okay, why are they 5,000 years more advanced than we are? Well, that's a good reason why. And 5,000 years based on our past would say, well, maybe that's still not enough time. Maybe it's 10,000 or 20,000 years. I don't know. So I was very curious about that. Thank you for answering that question. One of the other things I was really curious about, and Annie, please jump in here at any point where you want to ask a question. I was really curious about the nature of reproduction, children, and some of their views of how they replace themselves and that whole process. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's kind of a big subject, but it's kind of hard to imagine in a lot of ways. But basically, to address one thing is like, even we know how to do this, and that is that if we take a soil sample from somewhere for 40 years worth of that sample, we can tell and collect DNA from whatever was through there or had passed through there, who had left the DNA, right? And so they could, so really, all they need is that to blend it with something else to make a being or whatever they may do or thought of to be doing. But so what they do is they like basically there's no such thing as sex anymore in their society. When there is, it's more of a ceremonial or tribal type thing. And it's usually what they call twin stars that make this choice, and they want to have a child. So it doesn't really matter if you have two males, two females, or a male and a female that want to bring something into this world to be biological parents too. And one thing skipping ahead is that the child sometimes will be really connected to their biologicals. Other times they're not. It really doesn't matter. It's more of an ancestry thing. So anyway, there's always a female that's needed for this. And so whether it be, through a sexual act, which is usually just one time, and it takes, and then immediately those they see that a being is created at that moment of contact, when the sperm hits the egg or whatever, and that's removed. And for better or lack of words, they put that in a test tube, and in that test tube, it grows. And it will grow for many years because their lifespans is quite different than what ours are. And in that process, they will analyze the baby's DNA for the point of having any defects. And the only alterations they will ever make to that DNA is things that are very negative, like a deformity or something like that. And then that's corrected. But that's the extent of what they do to, in the aspect of changing something. And then once it grows to a certain point, in this process, there's other things that take place. I'm definitely not an expert or couldn't possibly understand a lot of things that they do. But one of the things I noticed is they use light therapy. In a sense, I call it light therapy, where, different lights are sent to them in this growing phase. And then once they are about what we would expect to be like 3 or 4 years old, they are removed from this, and that's basically their birth. And so they're all already able to learn to walk within a day and talk, and then start learning languages through the process of these surrogates. The surrogates are all volunteers, and they all have specialties. And so the biologicals try to decide which ones that they most need, or assemble the amount of surrogates in a specific way, so that these talents will be taught to the child. And so at that point, the kid is raised and starts to learn all these different ways and all these different things, in a sense of finding their self, in a sense, their own way. And because each of us have this thing that's innate in us, as we enter a body and are birthed to have particular skills or needs to fulfill, like they choose to be this, and they choose to have these biologicals, and they choose to have interactions with specific people and to learn specific things throughout their life. And so when they choose that, those things will come they'll come out if they're surrounded by people that are teaching them, that allows them to find all these things on their own. And then, so they're already at an advantage, right, to fulfill what it is that they came to do in this life, or in that particular life. To answer it?
Yeah, that really does. I think for Earth humans, I think sex is going to bear on for a while, because that kind of reproduction is far beyond, where we're at. And maybe that's 30, 40,000 years from now. I don't know. It's pretty funny. Well, I guess the last question, or for that I have, at least to think of, where we're going to go, where we can go with this is, do you have any sense of what the Plejarens think of as their relationship to us as Earth humans? What do they see as the differences between us, and do they have a relationship to us in terms of, the past or something? This goes into the territory of, asking questions about the past, human past, but it's kind of for some people very important to maybe understand that. Do you have any thoughts on that concept?
Yeah. Basically what I found out is, like, a lot of things that I ask them about, I don't really get an exact answer. And I think there's a purpose behind that. But it seems as though those things that haven't been directly answered to me, I know. There's a difference between believing and knowing. And there's been hints and because our language is, like them speaking to me, even though they're speaking in my language, we still don't always quite understand each other and know how to explain certain things. That's why a lot of it is show me sort of stuff. And we are basically we're seeded by them. There could be others too that we have been seeded by, but it's discoverable also because of some of the experiences that are, would take an entire couple days to explain. But essentially they seeded us, and now they have come back to us. And no, they're not here to save the world. You know, every 13,500 years we restart because we fail. And hopefully this time, maybe we don't. And so in a way, we have reached a point where we can have contact, but as a whole, we're not ready because there has to be a single source for them to give something to us. In other words, that's what people are expecting. Oh, they're going to save the world, and you know, they'll come here and save us from everything. And that can't be further from the truth. We would just destroy ourselves if we had stuff that we didn't understand or had prepared for years to understand what its purpose was. And so they're not here to do any of that. But you know, they've been to the governments, and that's always failed. There's several species that actually works with our governments, several different governments, although that's more of a distraction than anything else. And the way, at least as far as the Plejarens are concerned, their contact that they're working with us, they select certain individuals that have, you know, a resume in a sense to have the ability to understand what they show us. And the idea is like the 100 monkey thing, you know, they show one, that person shows more and more, and it just keeps growing, right? To a point where they have one source to go to, which would be all of us. And it isn't really, there's no mystery to it or anything. They just, like with me, they have showed me these different things and the different ways to think. And then I apply them, and they're so profound in the methods that they have taught me. I've learned all these things before. I mean, I spent years in the temples and stuff like that, and trained under some of the greatest masters of our world. And, you know, I mean, and had dialogue with these amazing spiritual beings and stuff here on earth. And none of it really compared to what they're teaching me. It's as though I would just went through kindergarten, and with them, they're actually showing me actuation of these sort of things and being able to do it all on my own. And they just sort of nudge me when I start to go off path and put me back online or whatever. And then as I experience these things, and you know, what is really funny to me is I don't know how many times I have been told, you know, the single answer to everything is love. It just doesn't do it justice. First, you have to understand what love really means, right? And but it's absolutely true. It's finding something within yourself that you've been so protected with all of your life, because it's a necessity. You know, I mean, here on earth, it's like when I go onto the ship, I have to flip a switch. You know, I'm open and here I am. And then when I go off the ship, I know I have to flip that switch because people here aren't ready, you know, to interact with in that way, because you're completely open, completely vulnerable with them. And they know everything about you, and you know everything about them in a way. And so that's how you act. But when you're here on earth, you have to have a different face for every person that you speak to. I mean, it's not just a necessity, but it's being polite and sort of, you know, you have to understand who it is that you're facing and who to speak to. It's not deceptive or anything. It's just that you are expected in so many different ways. And that these people that stand around in a circle and profess, you know, we all love each other and we're all part of the same community. They have no idea what that means, because if they did, they wouldn't have to say it to begin with. They would just be it. What was the question?
Well, I guess the real question to ask there is not so much a question, but it's an awareness. It's like what you're saying is the spiritual place that these Plejarens are in is something that's way out there for us, pretty far out there, and it makes us a real. It shows some of the limitations that we have to deal with here as Earth humans. And that is how do you begin that process of transforming an entire population of the whole planet, 8 billion people, however many people are here. That's really difficult.
I think I caught up. One of the things that they really liked about a comment that I made, and that was about Jesus, and how at that one moment after he healed all these people, he told all these other people that were around, you, the people of this earth, And you have to pay attention to the words the way they were said in the beginning, because it's been changed so many times. But you, the people of this earth, can do all that I can do and more. And they really resonated with that, because essentially that's what it was, is that we have no idea what we are really truly capable of. And if we did, then we realize how really stupid we are because of the things that we do. But the things that they teach me, one of the things I call sensing, and sensing is kind of like a connection to anything out there that you really want in a spiritual sense. Like if you were listening to somebody who was spiritual here, they would tell you a process. Well, there is no process really. There's only a feeling. And you don't have to set an intent, because you already have an intent. It's as though, like, when a person sits down and prays, it's like, hi God, I love you, and all this sort of thing. And you don't ask for anything, and you don't, other than, I love you, I miss you, and thank you, and in Jesus' name, amen. That's a prayer, because the intent is already there. You don't have to profess your intent, because when you profess your intent, you're saying what you think you want, not what you truly want. And so the message never really seems to connect. Well, in sensing, it's really similar to like a prayer, except for you're not saying anything. You already know what it is, the intent. One of the examples was like me and Sam Jesser are sitting on my Jeep and looking at the sky by the ocean, and we're looking up there, and she goes, "What would you like?" And I said, maybe I could talk to some of those people out there. And, I was just kind of joking at the time. And she says, okay, you remember this thing that we went through with the sensing? And I said, yes. And so, see, my intent had already been set. I don't have to go through that again. I've already said what I wanted to do, right? And so sensing requires us to find gratitude. And to me, what like gratitude is a moment in your life that is so sacred to you, where there was so much love being expressed and learning. And I mean, it was a moment that could have been the only thing that ever happened in your life, and your life would have been worth it. And for me, one of the most important things was the first time that I saved a little kid from human trafficking. And, there was going through this process, and she was scared of me and everything at the first. And then we're on this long ride in a van, and she's sitting on my lap, and when somebody is staring at you, you can feel it, sort of thing. And I didn't want to look at her because I didn't want to scare her anymore and stuff. But it was just like, oh shit. And I looked at her, right? And when I met eyes with her, everything changed for me in my life. And I understood, I found a new level of love. And so anyways, the whole experience I go back to, and what happens is as you start to practice it and you start to let go inside, you don't even know you're letting go of certain things inside that prevented you from re-experiencing the same thing. And again, what we have is we have imprints of our memory. And a lot of times those imprints aren't exactly what took place, but it's still there as an imprint. Well, when you're doing it through gratitude and you start to see this, it starts to become real all over again, as though it's happening in that presence. Like for her, like I saw her eyes for the really first time. I knew what was taking place, and I could smell everything and feel everything. And I could even see the wrinkles on her clothes, which I hadn't remembered prior to. And so as I get into that, where it starts to become a reality, I hear a voice, and it says, hello. And so I go like, greetings and salutation sort of thing. It's the only thing I could think of in my head. I mean, I'm weird that way, but so I had actually spoke to somebody who was up there in the stars, and I could see this little light moving around, and it went away. But but in healing, the same thing with healing, as you're going into this, you're breathing and you're finding this gratitude that's so significant in your life. And it opens the door to all these other possibilities that you can imagine. And I mean, that's just one thing that they've presented to me, which I've actually, activated. And it's mind blowing.
Wow, that sounds really wonderful. And it's, I think something that everybody, hopefully everybody, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people can appreciate that, that feeling of gratitude is somehow a part of their life at some moment in their life. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is you go back and you relive that moment of gratitude that you had for the experience, and in the process, your intention to communicate or connect becomes more possible at that time. Not that it's necessarily going to happen, but certainly more possible. That really is something critical, I think, to understand about the spirituality level that the Plejarens are at, and their understanding of that, and how this is just a common understanding for them, not so common for us. That I think is maybe part of the reason why we have such a difference in, 5,000 years worth of Plejaren evolution over Earth humans. So, Annie, do you have anything that you want to ask or say?
I would like to hear about, now, you get to go on a lab ship, but they also have their own little personal conveyances. Do you think maybe that what you're calling the pod there could be what was seen underwater? To go into the water?
I'm not sure you're asking.
Well, tell me about your pod ride underwater.
Well, it's a pretty long story. Let me jump back real quick before I answer that. Is like what I was talking about, the consciousness and like the sensing and these new things that they're bringing up to me. When I first met them, it was as though there's a person sitting in front of me, and I'm sitting here, and they ask a question, I answer, and then I ask a question, and then they answer. And that's the way it began in the very beginning. But what started to take place was that it didn't feel like I was, giving them anything. Like I wasn't answering anything for them. And, I thought they were just giving everything to me. And then like I had this conversation with like the captain where he sort of explained to me, that's because we are becoming, one in a sense, all of us, because of our love for each other. And so by just being there, I'm sharing, and I am teaching them multiple things about interacting with me and the way we think and the way we see things, and all those different things. So yeah, I am providing for them everything that they're asking for and more. But at the same time, what I'm receiving seems to be just amazing, and it's so much bigger. And see, that's the point, is like when they teach these contactees that they select, a younger person basically that is ready, to receive this sort of interaction with them. And what will happen is that that person will go back in Earth, as they're learning and after they've learned what it is that they needed. And they won't go out and profess themselves as to be a guru or a teacher or anything else. They will just have their regular lives, continue to do whatever it is that they do. But through their actions, people will see how they're different and how they react to certain things and how they do certain things. So it's like educating people without them even though they're being educated, and without a teacher and without a student. It just becomes a natural process. And like I say, then that bleeds to one person, then bleeds to another person, bleeds to another person. Next thing you know, the whole globe has, assimilated into this way of consciousness that is more advanced, and that we will be more able to handle the things that they can provide to us in further knowledge or learnings. And so like you were asking about like the pod is like, to me, it's hard to describe. People see some UFOs, they call them a tic tac. Well, this looks more like a tic tac than that.
That's what I wondered. Yes.
Yeah, and it's the shape of it is like that. The one in particular that I've grown accustomed to is about 6 feet long. They can put 1 or 2 seats in it, and it's completely covered, like in my opinion, it'd be white, right? But there's no seams or anything on it. So it's like, how do you get in it, sort of thing. And they have this way of moving their hands and I guess energy behind it. that then suddenly you'll see like lines grow out, or there's like a hatch and it opens. And then, so it's still, they got seats in there. There's no instruments. There's nothing there except for seats, right? And so you get into these seat, and now you're inside, and you close the hatch. Well, once the hatch is closed, it's still opaque on the outside. It appears all white, but you can see perfectly fine outside of it, as though it was just a tinted glass. And so there's so much to say on this topic, but like, for instance, one of the things that I experienced was, you don't really feel any motion on the ship. You don't feel, motion in this little pod sort of thing when you're moving. And, it's not like Star Trek or something when they start to turn, a bow, and you got this. It's not like that at all. It's instantaneously. There was one experience that I had where we flew out and came back, and when we were just in space, like, they told me I needed a reference point to know where I was. And so, I kind of, yeah, okay, right. I can't see stuff off my left or whatever. And we moved forward, and it was like, you can control the speed, rather it go really slow or just like instantaneous if you have a course plotted or whatever. But, I kept going left and then right and then forward, and I was completely lost because I didn't feel any sensation of movement. I didn't see anything move. And I looked over to see where the moon was, and I couldn't find it. So eventually I figured out how to get in a position where I could see it. And when I go forward, I could continue to see it, in my left. And then when I would turn, I felt absolutely nothing. And, I'm looking down, and then I look back up and the moon's gone. And then I turn again and it's not there. Turn again. Finally, there it is on the other side of the pod. So you feel absolutely nothing. And it's instantaneous, the movement. Also, we went into the water, like I was saying before about this field that is generated around them. And no matter what you're going through, it's all the same. And so, like, we entered the water, and so we were able to navigate through the waters and stuff, and then come back out without even noticing any difference. And the only time that you can sense movement is when you're just puttering around, in a sense. So, is that what you asked?
Yes. What part of the earth were you going underwater? Where were you?
Out near Hawaii.
Huh?
Near Hawaii.
Hawaii. Yeah. Did you ever check the time and date and lon and lat to see if any sightings were in that area? That would be interesting to do.
Now, that's a funny thing too that you mentioned. Is like this one time when I was first getting to know them and they felt trust in me, they allowed me to visit a place where there were several ships, and I was walking like alongside of them at a distance. Of course, I wasn't permitted anywhere close to them, but I'm walking along, and I decided to look back at one point, and it was like I had walked a long way, but I only see so much, back behind me. So I turn around and I start walking. As I walk back, I could start to see more and more. And they weren't on a curve or anything. It was a straight line, but it seemed as though I could only see it from a certain distance. And then it just sort of disappeared as I moved forward, but I'd turn around and walk back and it would reappear. So I don't know what it is that causes this. But one other thing here is that they explained to me that their ships were made entirely of Earth materials.
Okay, so they collected here. We've always heard about that. So that's a good validation, that they are interested in our minerals. And so this was a lab ship.
Yeah.
They weren't ready for you.
No.
And so that turns into a whole journey. How long have you been doing this? 6 months? 9 months?
I think so.
I don't even,
May or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you've had so many adventures during all of that time, and you're keeping your diary.
Yeah.
Every time you go up, you come back and write notes so that you're able to write your book and tell us, what your adventures are, which are just totally beyond any of our comprehension. I think everybody's jealous. Everybody wants to go with you. Everybody wants to show up on the ship. And, I don't think that's going to happen. But do they talk anything about our future? Do they think we're going to make it? Are they going to help us? Are they going to, it's non-interference? What's the sensation that you get on that from them?
Well, that's not the way they think. They think about now. And because it's just kind of like the teachings I learned in the temple, you perfect now, you don't have to worry about the future.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if we're ready, we'll be ready. If we're not, we're not. So it's not like that. It's not in control. In other words, we don't predict things.
You don't predict things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Dan, bail me out. What?
Well, here's something a lot of
I
people
want
might
him to say yes, they'll come help us, but no.
Well, here's something that's kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, is that interacting with them is really funny. When I wrote this book, I just wrote it for some friends, and I wanted to document basically what my experience was. And it turned out to be something much different than that, I guess. And I couldn't understand or the fascination behind my experience, because it's not like anything that I've ever seen in there. It seems like everything's doom and gloom, when it comes to the aliens, or it's profound in some manner, or it's one time, or that they're being abducted and taken and that stuff. So I kind of kid around with them in a way. It's like, oh, so when are you going to abduct me next, sort of thing, or when are you going to eat me, sort of thing. But it's funny. I mean, my interaction with them could be like with anybody, somebody, a foreigner or something that was here, and how you're trying to learn about each other in a sense. But there's nothing like crazy stuff like that, you would expect. It's just like, I'm part of this other family that happens to live, somewhere else in a sense. And it's almost as though that, they have reached a certain point where they had procedure and stuff, and they weren't used to, and they weren't prepared for to meet or contact with a human or a earth person. And so in that process, I've kind of reinitiated a lot of things that they had sort of lost in a sense. Not necessarily, these people are different, because the lab people are more like a military unit, what we would call as a military unit, yet they don't have a military, they don't need one. But and they have, everybody's equal, right? And no matter if you're a servant or if you're a commander or a captain, there's no difference between you. It's just that you have fit into a specific skill that is the best that you are. And so interacting with these people, they had gotten used to certain procedures and things like that, as the other people do in their jobs, right? And so, they live to be about 1,000 years old, where we, live generally like 100 or whatever. So you see in the difference, like 10% of what their life is. And I think that has a lot to do with the space and moving through it and that sort of thing, and all that junk, that science stuff. But it's funny because I just be me, right? And I hate being bored, and I hate just following a process, and I rather just ad lib, so to speak. And I'm sarcastic about everything, so it kind of eases the mood in a way, and I've gotten used to that, because as a military contractor, when you're going out on a mission, everything can be so serious and everybody deep in thought, thinking through the mission and all that stuff. And then you just go up and call somebody an idiot for no reason or whatever. And it sort of breaks that focus so that you're more ingrained and you've already become that focus. Well, it's the same with like them. And I'll just act myself in a lot of ways or play with them. Like, for instance, one of the things is like, I'll say, you know how to keep an alien in suspense, and they'll say, what, and they're all interested. And then I just walk away, and tell them, I'll tell you later, sort of thing. And, so now they try to play the same games with me, but of course they're not good at it. So I have to help them and encourage them in a lot of ways. But it's interesting how much they are so much like us in so many ways. And they're, because I'm not working with them in a sense, I'm just hanging out with them. And so we get into different things, and they show me these simple things that I guess would be amazing to other people, but I see them as another process that I can, understand on their ship or whatever, like getting coffee, that was a really big deal. So they have like, I keep using these words like a replicator or whatever, where, a menu for each individual, no matter what species they may be that are on the ship, they can have their own menu. And so they can retrieve their own types of food and stuff. And so it was kind of a big process, kind of more interesting than putting metal together and stretching it out. I told them about coffee. And so they made it so that I could get coffee on the ship. And it's like the best coffee ever, but it's funny too, because there's lessons that have come from that, not just the learning of getting coffee or it being coffee, but incidents that occur because of the coffee. And now the captain is addicted to coffee. And so we have this little bond, right? And so on and so forth. And it's just incredible the way we see things and the trouble that we get into. And so when I wrote the book, like I was saying, it just didn't make sense to me why people were really liking this. And I'm just writing down what I experienced. And so, and things have changed in that. I mean, everything about what I do has changed. Not because I intend or am looking to change something. It's just that suddenly I'm doing it, and then I recognize that what I'm doing, I wasn't able to do before. And it's all just being and experiencing things with them. And I think the biggest thing is, is about the love thing, how love is and what it means, and how important it is for all of us to be able to fill the brain with that sort of sense, and being able to be completely naked in a sense about who you've been and who you were, to what you are now, that sort of thing. So I understand it all. I understand why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's probably going to go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's between love, gratitude, everybody's naked, and we're all equal. Well, it's going to be quite a few thousand years before we get to that point.
The funny thing is, not once you've experienced it, but you have to be in an environment that allows you that.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your T-shirt. Tell us about your organization.
We're the best in the world at what we do. We rescue kids from human trafficking or from child sex slavery. And it's been an incredible journey because we hardly get any donations or anything, but we do things differently than others do. Just like a lot of people don't understand that, like in the United States, it's really illegal for anybody to do anything about human trafficking. If they see it, they're supposed to notify somebody. But then that's kind of funny too, process. It can't really work through the police unless it's happening in their presence. And so it has to go down a whole log like a FBI, and it has to be over 20 people involved and so on and so forth. And then like the charities that you see, they follow a process, and it's more important to find payroll than it is to really understand what it is that human trafficking is. And so, that's part of our struggle, but we may have one law, and that's human law. And that's what we obey. So,
Yeah.
Wow, that's really special and wonderful, isn't it? I'm just blown away by that concept. You know, and I'm so personally grateful for the work that you do, for us Earth humans who desperately are in need of that. We're just about an hour and a half now into this conversation, so I don't want it to go too long. I don't want to wear you out. So you got your coffee. That's really good.
yeah.
And you know, I think we can maybe table this now and go on to conversation number 2 sometime later. So what do you guys, any concluding thoughts or
Buy
things that
the
you want
book,
to say?
folks. Plejaren Diaries.
Yeah.
That's it for me.
Okay.
Live long and prosper.
That's a good ending. Yes.
Yes, it is. It's a very good ending. Live long and prosper. Okay.
Well, thank
All right.
you, Z.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Cezanne.
Bye.
Thank you, Annie. And
Bye-bye.
that's it. So we'll be back
Okay.
with episode 2 sometime later.